and welcome to No Notes, the show where three cerebral cinephiles take a break from chatting guilty pleasures to discuss cinematic treasures. Each month, we'll take turns selecting a film we believe to be virtually flawless, one that had a significant impact on our lives and/or helped shape the film lovers we became. If you love movies, if you really love movies, this is the show for you.
Well, like Stephanie said, welcome to No Notes, a morbidly beautiful podcast where three rhythmically challenged movie lovers march to the beat of their own, slightly out of tune drum. With No Notes, this one especially, my lovely band leaders and I take a break from bashing or blessing guilty pleasure horror films, slowing the measure way down, focusing instead on the movies, regardless of genre, that snared us with their glory. Stephanie started us off with a light and airy feel-good flick, tapping the hi-hat with precision with her selection, My Neighbor Totoro, filling our hearts with bombastic wonder and subtle pulses of joy. Next, as mentioned, Kelly went full animal on the drum kit with Phantom of the Paradise, a balls-to-the-wall solo full of blast beats and time changes, hammering us with its ingenuity, leaving us drenched in sweat but triumphant in our performance. For August, the lead chair went to me, and I wanted to scale it down to the bare bones, to strip away all of the studio trickery, leaving us with a film that is thundering with two-person tension, one that fills in the blockbuster gaps with small-stakes storytelling, and one that proves that sticks and stones may not be the only harmful things after all. Whether you've been keeping time with this podcast from the very beginning or are just now finding the tempo, we are happy to have you with us as we strike the gong and focus on our percussive pontification on August's No Notes pick, featuring a decidedly un-Christmas-like little drummer boy, 2014's Whiplash, which for me is the reason I picked this movie is because we tend to look at these movies that are kind of a little more bombastic, a little more well known. I'm not going to say that Whiplash isn't well known. It's obviously it did well at Cannes Film Festival. It's known. J.K. Simmons is kind of a big deal. I would even dare say that what's his bucket?
Miles Teller.
Miles Teller is also well known. So it's not like nobody knows about this movie. But for me, it's what you can do when you say, I'm just going to make a very focused movie about one thing. I'm going to shoot it in 19 days, which they did, and bring this semi-autobiographical film out into the world and say, here, look, here's this little slice of small stake storytelling, which if you watch the movie, it's anything but small stakes for the people invested, especially Andrew Neiman. Not small stakes at all, but in the grand pantheon of movies in general, compared to Avengers and all this stuff, this is a very slice of life on one person's journey to becoming a musical protege. And for me, I love to occasionally take a break from what we're used to seeing in cinema with the bombast and the over-the-top stuff, and just really kind of narrowing the scope to just give me two people, two wills bashing against each other. Nothing else really. It's them and music. This is a movie about two people bashing against each other, trying to exert dominance with will. And is this in fact sometimes the path to greatness? Do you have to go this route? And I don't know. There's something about this movie to me that it just is magical in that regard. Where even I think my son was 15 when we watched it. And he's a teenager. He's used to explosions. He wants to see guns and boobs and whatever. And he sat through this whole movie.
Who doesn't?
Right? But he sat through this whole movie and he said nothing. Like, he was transfixed from the moment it started until the end. I mean, for those of us that enjoy it, that's the power that this movie brings. Is you don't need guns. You don't need hostages, or you don't need any of the things that we normally associate tension with in a film. To have tension in this movie. This is one of the most tense movies I've ever seen, and it's literally two people talking, like, really. And so, I don't know, to me, it's a triumph of smaller filmmaking, if you will, that you don't have to have all this other fluff to make a really compelling and emotionally gripping and very tense movies. Everything about it I love. And I'm not even a big jazz guy, but the music in this movie is fucking phenomenal. And especially because my daughter drums. And so I've been at some of these drum lessons. I've seen the work that goes into it. It's to be even a mediocre drummer is ridiculously hard. And so to see this journey and to know all the work that goes into really, really mastering that instrument is incredible. And I think they really this movie, more than most other music movies, really captured that for me. They're like, this is the struggle that you're going to face if you want to be a great musician. It's not easy. So that was why it was my pick.
Jack, that was a beautiful intro.
Whoop, 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 whoop,
You
whoop.
did.
Agreed.
Phenomenal.
Seconded. Great job.
Sweet.
Okay. Is it our turn to kind of chime in?
Absolutely.
Get to it, Steph.
Wait, do you want me to go
Steph, go.
next? All right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I feel like I should close this out.
All right.
So that people can prepare their pitchforks.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's what I said. Oh boy.
Oh,
Okay.
snap.
Well, there is a fine line between genius and madness. And we've talked about this a few times before on this show. Some of our most beloved cinematic treasures were helmed by incomparable talents who crafted their magnum opuses through literal blood, sweat, and tears, often pushing their performers to the point of sadistic cruelty, all in pursuit of enduring excellence. It's this kind of by any means necessary artistry that makes you question whether or not the ends justify the means. If the end result is the kind of art that leaves a lasting mark, the crafting of a genuine legacy, can we forgive the brutal measures it took to get there? We often can and do. In retrospect, once glory is achieved, we tend to sweep the atrocities under the rug and collectively acknowledge our willingness to make great allowances for great genius. Whiplash is the thrilling, gut-wrenching manifestation of that question. On paper, it sounds quaint, perhaps even a little dull. It's a film we think we've seen a million times before. But this is not an inspirational feel-good film about overcoming the odds and finding success and happiness. Produced by Jason Blum, it's a tense, devastating thriller and a bruising character drama. Music instructor Terrence Fletcher is volatile and unpredictable, played to sinister perfection by J.K. Simmons. Sometimes he's darkly funny. Other times he's downright terrifying. His idea of motivation includes berating and psychologically abusing his students like a drill instructor from hell, like something straight out of Full Metal Jacket. In his unquenchable thirst to become one of the all-time drumming greats, 19-year-old jazz drummer Andrew gets pushed to the brink of insanity. Is it for his own good? Is it for Fletcher's selfish and all-consuming need for personal glory? Does Fletcher truly think his methods are justified and warranted, given that they might produce true greatness? And is he right? Does the kind of success Andrew craved demand the kind of militant pressure Fletcher puts on him? Is this how you weed out the want-its versus the need-its and have-to-have-its, whatever it takes? Or, as Andrew muses at one point, is Fletcher risking breaking the brilliant before they have a chance to truly shine? There are so many profound questions asked in this film and no easy answers. But that's what makes it so layered and potent and a thrill to discuss and analyze. It's not just the performances that make this film such a masterpiece, it's also a technical marvel, with jazz music and drumming exquisitely built into the language of the film. It's precise and controlled, but also bursting with energy, culminating in a riveting climax that will have you on the edge of your seat. It's an electrifying combination of jaw-clenching tension and jaw-dropping awe. In my opinion, an absolutely perfect film from beginning to end, no notes. Kelly, over to you.
Hey, Internet. You're probably going to hate what I'm about to say. But where my good friends and co-hosts, Steph and Jack, have no notes, what I can tell you is that I have copious fucking notes. I'm not going to go into all of it here because I'm sure we're going to dive into it. What I want to say at the outset is I get why you guys liked this movie. I do. J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller both give really great performances, and they do heavy lifting that Damien Chazelle's script does not. I think there's a version of this movie that's written by Aaron Sorkin that's really interesting, and I'm super into. And we'll get into the point where I think that the female character who is literally nothing in this movie, she is cotton candy. But he tries to give her the speech from The Social Network and it just doesn't work because there's nothing there. and Damien Chazelle's just not actually a good writer. I did not enjoy this movie. I'm going to be completely frank. I have my own history with angry, yelling white men that made watching an hour and 47 minutes of an angry, yelling white man relatively unpleasant, to be completely frank. And I'm genuinely not sure what the end takeaway from this movie was. I don't know if it was the ends justify the means and like, oh, it's okay to be a fucking bastard if you come out being a really good drummer. I will say that, and I'll save this as a tease. I texted my very dear friend Mike Klein about this because he is a drummer and has been for most of his life, and I was really interested in hearing his takeaway on this as a drummer, a talented drummer, a very gifted drummer. And he loved it. So I am very, very, very comfortable with the idea that I am wildly in the minority and that there is no objective right or wrong. My perspective is specific to me, and I do have a page of notes to defend it, but I'm not saying that I am objectively correct in disliking this movie or that anybody else is objectively wrong in liking it. I mean, yay. I'm glad y'all liked it. I'm always glad when somebody takes something from a movie. I personally did not enjoy it. About halfway through, I had to pee, and I paused it and thought, haha, this movie's almost over. Yay. And I saw, oh no, it's not even close to almost over. I still have a bunch of this movie to watch. Something that we'll get a little bit into more deeply is that I kind of don't particularly enjoy Damien Chazelle's whole only white guys understand jazz thing. That's something that I find deeply problematic. And also I felt like you absolutely got that J.K. Simmons, who is an astonishingly great actor, is a bastard without all of the homophobic and ableist speech that he leaned into. That made me genuinely uncomfortable. Even though I understood that the idea was to say he's the bad guy, I felt like, you know, you could kind of get that across without using certain slurs that, to me, took me out of the movie. I'm not going to get too into it because I got notes that I'm going to interject and randomly wave my arms and stomp my feet. And I would like to also apologize very quickly for the fact that my cat has already been very loud and vocal. He has hopped up, he has purred, and he has also knocked over a watering can for no reason that I can figure out other than he's feeling his wild oats. I think he's got it out of his system, so we're ready to go. Let's do this, guys.
Kelly, this is the feistiest I have ever heard you.
Same.
Like, you are riled up. I haven't.
Oh, you don't even know the
you.
half of it. I haven't even really let loose yet.
Oh no!
Damn, what have I unleashed?
I don't know,
I'm excited about it. I'm truly excited about it in a way because it's very different for me when I watch a movie and I'm like, I don't understand why people like this. I do understand why people like this. And I think a lot of why people like it truly is the power of the performances from J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller, who are both truly riveting and just give 100% in an intimate setting. But I think that if you can pull back enough to listen to Damien Chazelle's dialogue, which is not very good, and also deal with the very problematic elements of the one female character is written like nothing, truly like nothing. And the idea that I feel like the message this movie is giving is really like kind of fucked up and muddled and confused about whether it's saying like, it's okay to throw a cymbal at somebody's head if you're drawing the best performance out of them. Which I wasn't sure about until the end. And then at the end, I was like, oh no, they're saying this is fine. This was the right choice. Yay, J.K. Simmons for being an abusive piece of shit. Hooray.
Jack, do you care if do you want to take that?
We can both take it, Steph. So why don't you go first and I'll follow up.
Well,
I'm sorry. I feel like they're coming at me from two ends.
We will tag team the hell out of this.
Do you want me to go after her first or you?
No, go ahead. Okay, ladies first.
So
bring it on.
I disagree in your assessment that the film is telling us this is what you're supposed to take away from it, that all of this was totally fine and it's great. I think one of the things that makes this film such a masterpiece, in my opinion, is that it doesn't do that. I think it asks a lot of questions about the pursuit of this kind of success and lasting legacy, and kind of what you're willing to give, and what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, how far is too far. I think those are questions that it raises. I don't think it answers them, and I think that's part of what makes it so interesting, is that you have to kind of think about that for yourself and make those assessments and decide how you feel about these characters, who I will say neither one of them are perfect. Like, it's not like you have protagonist and antagonist. You have two kind of deeply flawed characters, obviously one in a totally different way. And they're both very, very passionate. And it's really kind of making you question about, like, is the passion worth it? Is the end result worth it? If the end result is kind of like I said in my opening, if the end result is greatness, is it worth everything it took to get there? Or, what is the line, and where do we draw it, and how do we, how comfortable do we feel? So for me, I don't think it says, oh no, this is how you're supposed to feel. I think it says, let's talk about this and let's think about this, because there's some big questions here.
I think you can almost hear me holding my breath and waiting.
I can hear you. Yeah.
If it had gone on to show that he got accepted into the conservatory, if he got second chair or third chair or something, and that he got everything that he was ever after, then I think the message of the film would be flawed. But I agree with you. I don't think, because it ends and all he did was potentially impress some music people. That's all he did. Potentially. We don't even know if he impressed them. We don't get it. We don't get anything. All we see is two people going at it. One person trying to bring out the best in people in a very flawed way. One person very codependent on that person and very, very hopeful of this person's approval and regard, and in fact, because I think this film does examine it very closely, where his father is saying, like, and his opinion really matters that much to you? And Andrew Neiman's like, yeah, it does. And of course you can see the hurt in his father's eyes, because it's like, fuck, like, my opinion of you isn't as important as this other person's, and so I don't think it's giving anybody an easy way out. I think this is a movie that's very much examining, hey, this isn't necessarily the only path to greatness, but there are probably some people who have gone down this path to greatness. And is it awesome? No, it's fucking awful. And it hurts. And he's literally bleeding for his art. But I think it's showing that in just this encapsulated moment, that these two people, it's not perfect. And Andrew, even, like, he knows this is terrible, and he chooses to stay in there. So it's not glamorizing any of it. I don't think it's, yes, the final scene is very impressive and stuff, but at the end of the day, they're still very dysfunctional people in a very dysfunctional relationship. Nothing's fixed. They're not friends. All he did was impress him on the stage. It's not going to change Fletcher's demeanor in any way, shape, or form. And again, we don't see any victory at the end of this film. There's nothing that says he got what he wanted. It cuts to black. So
I disagree.
And I really do think that I don't care about, like, his other films. I think in this one, I don't think that Nicole character was supposed to be much of anything. I think that was an intentional decision.
There's no point in including her.
But there is, because when he falls from grace and he's done, he's like, fuck drumming, I'm done. Right? He's finished. Because this, I can't speak for you guys, but if we've ever been, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, if you've ever been in a low moment of your life and you let something good go, and maybe you're like regretting that decision. Oh my God, I let this good person go. I let this good thing go. And he tries to bring it back, and she's moved on. And I think that was a very intentional inclusion to say, tough shit, dude. Like, you let her go in a very brutal way. You try to justify it all you want. And she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Legit. What the fuck is wrong with you? And then he tries to, like, backtrack on that and make it all good. And she's like, and it's awkward. And it's supposed to be awkward because you feel it. You're like, fuck, this is awkward for all parties. It's awkward to watch it as an audience member. So
I don't care about the awkwardness. I care about the fact that she's nothing. She's no one. And that the script goes out of the way to make her no one. That when he asks her what she wants, she says, I don't know. She is literally nothing. the script goes out of the way to make this female character into nothing other than a cipher for the male character. And so that he has something to be sad that isn't going to just react to him. I fucking hate that. I hate that so much. She is the only female character in the movie, and she's nothing at all. She's just something for him to want. And they don't even give her like the benefit of saying like, I would like to pursue this. It would be very little, but to give her like the bare minimum of like, I have something I want, but they don't even give her something she wants. She doesn't even get to have that. She is nothing but something for him to want. Oh, I'm getting fired up. I'm sorry.
No, let me say this. I think there is a point to her saying, I don't know what I want. Like, first of all, I don't think it makes you nothing to not know what you want. A lot of people are like, a lot of grown ass adults are like, I don't know what I want to do.
I knew a lot of people like that in college.
I know, her character has literally nothing else.
You know.
But I mean, then she brings it up. She's like, when he breaks up with her, she's like, it's because I don't have the same passion as you have. It's because I don't care about something the way that you do. So you think I'm not worthy. And he's basically like, yep, that's about right. And
the movie doesn't push back. It doesn't say like, oh, he's a fucking asshole for that. Like,
it
doesn't
does.
Give you the chance.
It totally does.
It does. You're supposed to like be.
He's our main character. He is like the closest thing to an audience surrogate we have.
But you're not supposed to think he's flawless. You're not supposed to think.
Well,
he's
no,
perfect.
I don't think flawless.
Yeah, he's not a hero.
He could at least be a tiny bit likable, and he is not likable at all.
The thing is that she represents what he's willing to sacrifice. She represents the normalcy of life. He's like, I will give up every fucking thing besides music to get my dream. And that's very important to the arc of his character, that he is that driven and that passionate.
Agreed.
That he's blinded to everything else. He doesn't.
Their relationship was 2 minutes long.
Well, listen, this movie is about two characters and only two characters, and nobody else really matters. The only reason anybody else is in the film is to give you some more understanding of the characters, the two characters. She is not meant to be a main character. She's not meant to have any real gravitas. She is meant to show you that he will sacrifice everything for what he wants, and that is her only purpose.
Yep. It's like the dinner conversation where he's like, his uncle's like, hey, you don't have any friends, do you? And he's like, no. I don't see any use for that. It just distracts me. So
everybody's a prick in that conversation, for the record. Like, there's not one likable person in that conversation. Like, one of my first notes is no one in this movie is likable. The dinner table scene was just white guys being terrible, and I meant it. I stand by it.
I had a different takeaway from that, because for me, it really kind of peels back the layers of American culture, where you've got these two cousins of his that are like, he's starting to talk about his music career. Nobody at the table really gives a fuck, truly, not even his dad. His dad's kind of like, which as a creative, when your parents don't believe in you, firsthand experience, that fucking blows. So having that in the movie, and that might be an autobiographical part, that might be part of what the writer came from, I don't know, and I don't really care. All I know is that it resonated with me, is that when you don't have that support system, and then you've got these cousins that come in and they're like AAA football, which is basically like high school football. And, oh yeah, he had a 93-yard touchdown. And immediately the tone shifts and nobody gives two fucks. They give even less fucks than they gave before about his music and his drumming. And now all the focus is on these guys playing really amateur football, and I think that was kind of a jab, which I am fine with. And hey, I love football.
Instead of bigging up what he's doing, he undermines what they're doing. And I think
does.
To me, that's just,
he's human.
Okay,
he's hurt.
Who among us isn't? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's
and I've done that before.
And I've done that too. You attack what you attack. You lash back out, and that's what I love about this movie. Is no, he's not a likable person. None of these people are likable.
Nobody's likable in it. I'm not rooting for anybody in this movie. I don't like any of them.
Can I say
but
one
he's
thing?
human.
I think it's important. Listen, I want to say one thing and then you guys can go back at it. I think it's important for this film that if you look at this, the only person who gives a shit about Andrew's passion and who thinks it's worthwhile in any way, shape, or form is this monster who abuses him. And it's why he has this codependent relationship. It's why this opinion matters so much. It's because the one person who gets him on any level is this person who is also terrorizing him. And that's really fucking important for the like crux and the conflict of this film is that like,
Agreed.
yes, this guy sucks, but also like he gets this kid in a way that nobody else in his whole life does.
He understands
And that's
the passion.
very important, I think.
It is.
I feel like that's just romanticizing abuse. I mean, he throws a cymbal at his head. And again, as I mentioned to Jack previously, I have a history of my own with yelling angry men. And so, like, I will say that for me, this movie was genuinely triggering, like, in a very real way. Like,
truly apologize.
Like, for
was not
watching an hour and 47 minutes of a man yelling at somebody just like took me back to my childhood in a way I did not particularly want to go back to my childhood. And, you know, having your artistic pursuits kind of underplayed also took me back to my childhood in a way I didn't want to go back to my childhood. And I'm perfectly ready to acknowledge that there is at least some part of me that reacted to this in a triggered way, in a way that, like, maybe some of it is my personal shit. I'm ready to acknowledge that, like, and to allow that, like, that's not the fault of the movie. That's not the fault of the writing. That's not the fault of anybody but my own shit. But I don't know that I think a lot of us have experiences with angry, yelling men that maybe it's hard for a lot of us to watch.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
to see that kind of abuse. And, like, I also felt like, as I mentioned briefly to you guys in the chat, like, there's a lot of ableist and homophobic language that I felt was wildly unnecessary. That, like, you got that, like, he's a prick and you don't need to hear him say the F slur and the R slur over and over and over again to get, like, he's an asshole. You already got that he's an asshole. He threw a cymbal at a man's head. Like, you don't need to hear those words that, to me, like, just immediately kind of clenched me up and took me out of the movie and made me feel like, okay, this movie was made in 2014. We were already past a point where people agreed, like, we don't use those words. We don't use them casually, and we don't need them in the same way that, like, people have stopped using or moved away from using the N-word to show that people are racist, because, like, you can do it without using these very inflammatory and painful words that open specific wounds, I think.
That's a tough one. And I'm not going to disagree with you as far as, do they need to go all in with all that stuff? No, absolutely not. You know, he's a monster without the use of all of that stuff.
Thank you. Yes, that's all I'm saying. Like, you can get that without needing to use that specific
Is it
language.
Overboard? Yeah, it's overboard, you know, and it not necessarily necessary. But as you know, I don't know. I think, you know, in a film, I guess, even like this, in this kind of film, you do have to have the protagonist, if you will. I'm not going to call him a hero, because Andrew's no hero. And I'm not going to call, you know, if it is Fletcher a villain? Absolutely, he is a villain, you know. But in any other movie, is the villain's purpose not to bring out the hero and the heroicism in the hero? Yes.
But does it bring out any heroicism in his character?
No, but it brings out his passion. It reaffirms his passion for drumming, and that whole 9-minute end drum solo, you know, which for somebody, again, who really loves music and loves drumming, is just such a beautiful piece of the movie that I don't care about the rest of it. He takes him and he gets him to that point. Now, again, what happens after that, nobody knows. Does he fade into
obscurity? But, like, isn't that a problem? Like, that he gets him to that point by being horrible?
If it is a problem to the extent that if Andrew was trying to escape from it and he just kept pulling him back, and he kind of did pull him back in. But if Andrew kept, like, saying no, and he kept drawing him back in, that's one thing. But Andrew's an adult. He makes his own decisions. So it's not glamorizing it, I don't think. It's not glorifying it, but it just says, hey, here's what this particular person was willing to sacrifice everything for his art. Is it the right decision? No, of course not. Would I sacrifice all those things for my writing? Absolutely not. You know, I don't care who's trying to make me a better writer, you know. I
mean, we're all writers in this group. So I'm just, I know it's a different medium, of course, but I'm just thinking, like, I know I wouldn't become a better writer if somebody was shouting horrible things at me.
No.
Saying horribly abusive things to me. Nothing constructive, just abuse. I mean, would you guys?
Well,
No,
here's the
but
thing.
I'm not.
There is something to be said. Look, I'm not defending this, okay? I need to be clear before you get mad at me, Kelly.
I'm not mad at anybody. I'm glad everybody liked it. I'm glad everybody liked it.
There is something to be said for, that speech that he gives where he says, saying good job is the worst thing that you can say to somebody. It's like the kiss of death because it breeds complacency. If you constantly like, you did great, good job. And all you hear over and over again is positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement, positive reinforcement. You don't push yourself to be better. And I hate negative feedback. I'm very, very sensitive. It's very hard for me to take, but it does light a fire in me. It does make me want to be better and want to prove that. Let me finish. It makes me want.
Sorry.
It makes me want to prove that I am better than somebody thinks I am.
Yes.
And I don't love it, and I would hate to be in a situation where someone was constantly berating me. But I will say that I recently got some feedback that kind of hurt my feelings, and immediately when I got it at first I was really sad and I felt sorry for myself. But then immediately I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna prove that that's not true and that I'm better than that. And so I do think there is a part of us that does need a little kick in the ass. Now, this is way more than a little kick in the ass for sure, but there's some truth. There's a kernel of truth in that as far as we don't really push ourselves or grow when all we ever hear is you're great. Everything you do is great. It's not a motivator.
Agreed.
I hear what you're saying, but I studied, my major was creative writing in college. And we had an entire semester dedicated to criticism and how to present it to people. And interestingly enough, none of it was physical violence.
I hear you.
There was no point where they said, hey, if you don't like this person's syntax, slap them across the face repeatedly. It was figure out a way to say this that's actually going to resonate with people and get through to them. I hear what you guys are saying. I truly do. And I'm not saying I'm right. I want to be very abundantly clear about this. I am not saying I'm right. I am saying this is how it hit me. To me, I felt like this movie was a little tiny bit more on J.K. Simmons' side than I was comfortable with. I felt like it was a little bit more saying well, his methods worked. At the end, he plays that incredible drum solo that, for the record, if I were in the audience, I would have been so bored by, and I would have been like, okay, this has been super fun. I'm going to go buy a beer. It felt a little bit to me like the movie was saying well, it worked. So isn't that cool? And I'm not saying that's the objective correct reading of it. I'm just saying it's how it hit me. And as a person who appreciates constructive criticism and feedback, but doesn't appreciate abuse, it really kind of stuck in my craw in a very specific way. In that I did not appreciate. J.K. Simmons is so fucking good in this movie. I do want to say that first and foremost. He's so fucking good in this. Miles Teller is really good in it, even though I did laugh out loud at the point where they said he was 19 years old and he is visibly almost 30 years old. Who do they think they are fooling? No one's buying that shit. Paul Reiser, I am possibly the one living Paul Reiser fan.
No, you're not.
He's amazing. He's so good. And he's really, really great in this, even though he doesn't get a lot of screen time. I thought, wow, he's really making the most of the time he has. And it was a little disappointing to me that they started out by building this really sweet relationship between Miles Teller and Paul Reiser. And then there's the dinner conversation that seems to undercut that. And then to me, the powerful moment, the powerful ending would have been Miles Teller going to Paul Reiser saying, you're good, and giving him the kiss on the cheek, and then them just walking away, saying, fuck this shit, we're done. And just walking away. I thought that would have been really, really powerful, to be honest, to me. because it felt to me at the end like the entire movie, you're kind of feeling like Miles Teller is desperately seeking J.K. Simmons' approval. And there is something that to me feels like it's supposed to be triumphant about J.K. Simmons specifically kind of conducting him at the end there, like going up to him and, leading him with the tempo and conducting him specifically. And you're supposed to feel like, oh, he finally got the approval of the one person he gives a shit about. And I really struggled with that because I felt like he's a piece of shit and you're kind of a piece of shit and everybody sucks and I don't care about anybody and I hate that this is happening to me.
See, I don't know. Oh, go ahead, Jack.
I have a completely different takeaway from that because as a father of children, right? So unfortunately, that scene is very, very accurate because as much as your children love you as they grow up, as they get older and they start to leave and not need you, there is that interesting. And he talks about like when they're having their pizza date, and she's like, "I'm still a little homesick," and he's like, "I still go see movies with my dad," and.
Which is one of the sweetest parts, and I like it.
It is. And I'm going to tell you, that's a slice of real life. But as they get older and they start chasing their pursuits, you see them less and less and less. And these other things, which you may or may not understand. I don't necessarily understand all the things that my oldest is passionate about and into. All that I can do is support him and say, that's awesome. How can I help? How can I support? I don't necessarily have to understand it. It's not necessarily my job as a parent of an adult to understand so much as support. And that's why, and maybe I'm taking away a different thing as a parent, but at that scene is sure, a traditional Hollywood movie would have had them walk out together triumphantly, father and son, but that is not real life. And in certain instances, this movie, and yes, is everything heightened? Sure, it has to be. It's a movie. If we watched a movie about people being very kind to each other, it would be very boring really quickly. And I'm all for it because I'm with you. I don't agree that violent, abusive criticism is ever a good thing. Do I think challenge is? Yes. If I get criticism on my writing, again, to mirror what Steph was saying, it does make me want to be a better writer. Now, if somebody was a complete asshat and throwing slurs and threatening violence on me, that would be a completely different story. But as far as in a movie setting, obviously it needs to be heightened, but in this regard, this movie is, like I said, it's small stake storytelling. And I really can resonate with the fact that there is no easy answer with this. And there's nothing about this movie that is easy because honestly, with kids, as they get older and they chase their dreams, none of that is easy. It's not easy as a parent, and so for me, that really resonated because it's like, yeah, I know exactly how that feels. I know how Paul Reiser feels when he's standing in the wings and he's looking through the glass. He's looking through this cracked door at his son, who he's moderately supported. He's bought him a drum set. He's helped put him in school. He doesn't really get it, but he's like, yeah, okay, I'll throw some money at you so you can go drum. Go do your drumming, little buddy, And he's standing there as his son is transcending from a child, right? I mean, this is almost like a metaphor as he's transcending from a child to adulthood and really blossoming into this thing that he was so passionate about. And that look on, because again, I'm also a huge Paul Reiser apologist, love that guy. And so to have like 5 minutes of screen time that he had to capture all of those emotions that he is, as he's watching his son do this, and that there's awe and there's like this crushing hurt because at this point he has lost his son, if you will, to music, and he knows it. And as a father who doesn't see his oldest very much because I've lost my son to life and to, all that, which is what we raise them to do, is we raise them to leave. That scene made it all that all tied it together. It's not glory. This is painful. All of this movie is painful, but sometimes life is painful. And sometimes I want to see that in a film that's not afraid to say, yeah, you know what? This all kind of sucks, but watch these two people, watch this movie that's tension. We'll fill it with some awesome music and maybe it'll suck just a little less. Is it a little over the top? It's a lot over the top, for sure. But I don't know. I will always respect a film that says, hey, you know what? I'm not going to make you feel good. That's not my goal, was to make you feel good. My goal was to make you wonder and ask questions and think about some hard things for a minute. Is it worth it? I don't know. For some people, it probably is. For me, oh, hell no. Going through that wouldn't be worth it. But for some people, maybe it is, because the analogy that they use in this movie about Charlie Parker becoming Bird is factual. Like, that actually happened. And I mean, he is, in the pantheon of music, in the pantheon of jazz greats, he is the guy. And so, to Steph's point, if somebody said, "Hey, Charlie, you know what? That was really cool. Yeah, you fucked up a couple times, but that's cool. Don't worry about it." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." Would he be good? Yeah. Would he be Charlie Parker? No. And so, again, not excusing the behavior in the movie, wouldn't excuse it in the movie, definitely wouldn't excuse it in real life. But do some people need that push to become great? For some people, is the pursuit of their art worth it? And I think for some people it is. And I also kind of give this movie a little bit of leeway, because Chazelle, the writer, director, he had a music instructor kind of similar. So I think in a roundabout sort of way, this was a very cathartic film for him to make too, to kind of exercise some of those demons. Everybody in this movie comes from a musical background. J.K. Simmons went to music school. He went to be a conductor. Miles Teller was a drummer, so they're all involved in music. And so, I don't know, for me as a music fucking nut, that I love these little factoids and these little nods. It's like, okay, it's like any other competition. It's like any other industry. It's awful. It's fucking terrible on the inside. Hollywood writing, it's terrible. The beauty industry, terrible. Fucking terrible people, start to finish. But can something amazing come from that? Oh, absolutely.
I do think, Kelly, and not to at all minimize your feelings or your... No,
That's
seriously.
okay. I've kind of accepted that nobody's going to be on my side on any of this.
Yeah,
so
and I'm not against
cool.
you. I'm saying, you'll understand what I say when I say I'm not trying to minimize your guttural reaction to this film. But the thing is that the fact that you had such a strong, visceral, really uncomfortable reaction, I do think is part of the power of this film and part of why I think it's so great. Because I do think, now, I understand you're bringing some personal stuff to this that's making it harder, and I relate to that as well.
Same.
And I've definitely watched films that are almost impossible to watch because of how much they resonate on a personal level. But I think outside of that, this film is meant to unnerve you. It is meant to challenge you. It is meant to upset you. It is meant to make you feel all the feelings. And the fact that it does, even if you kind of walked away from it going fuck this movie, I still think that is a testament to how powerful this film is. It really gets under your skin, and it's supposed to get under your skin.
Yep.
For sure. I mean, I'm going to be very soft in my anti-position to this movie, because again, I know I'm pretty much the only person in the world who feels that way. This is a movie that is almost universally beloved, and that's cool. I'm, as I've said repeatedly, I'm always glad when people love a movie, even if it doesn't resonate with me. There were a number of things with this movie that, to me, just honestly didn't even feel like good writing. I didn't feel like Damien Chazelle really got into an honest kind of, this is how people talk sort of dialogue place. I felt, again, in the same way that I feel like sometimes I feel like Quentin Tarantino uses both racial and misogynistic slurs to just kind of say hey, look at me. I'm down. It's okay. I can say this stuff. I felt a little bit like there was some of that with the homophobic and ableist slurs that were just hey, I can say these things because I don't really believe it, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There were things that made me genuinely uncomfortable. And that felt like they were not necessary and that they did not in any way service the story. But I can understand why people liked this. I do get it. I think that J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller both give really great performances. I think that it's astonishing what Paul Reiser does with his very limited screen time.
Yes.
I think that at the end, when Paul Reiser gives him the hug and the kiss, I'm just that's not a good actor. That's an amazing actor who's at the peak of his game and is doing so much with such limited screen time. And in that moment, I felt like he was more empathetic and human than almost any other character in the movie. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a beautiful moment. It's just not for me. I think Miles Teller was really, really great, even though his character is not particularly likable. And I wasn't really rooting for him, to be honest. I just kind of felt like I'm watching a bunch of characters I don't terribly like going through a thing. And there was a part of me that felt like, and you're welcome to disagree with me on this, but the sequence at the end where J.K. Simmons has invited Miles Teller to play with him, but then he sabotaged him. Like, if you're trying to tell everybody you're a really good conductor, doesn't it look bad for you too if your drummer fucks up?
Yeah, it does. But I think that's like he prioritizes the revenge over his
pride.
It just seemed to me like that didn't fit with his ego, with the size of his ego.
But I think that is ego.
No, I think it did.
Okay, well, I'm willing to certainly allow that.
The reason he makes the speech at the beginning, right, where he says these people have long memories, they won't forget, and so he is intentionally trying to sabotage Miles. Andrew Neiman sabotaged his career, right? So tit for tat, eye for an eye. Mm-hmm. He's going to bring him up on this stage with people that will not forget his face, and he mentions that speech. These people. I'm genuinely asking memories, though,
and doesn't it also sabotage his career then? Like, don't they feel like, oh, you're a bad instructor, you're a bad
because he can just blame it on
the conductor. He's just the conductor at that point.
I think I was going to say I do think it is his ego, because his ego is telling him like he has to win. He has to prove to this kid that he is nothing and that he is not going to win over him and that he did not get away with what he did and he is going to punish him. Yeah. And at that point, that's what his ego is telling him. That's the most important thing for his ego is to.
But the audience doesn't have all that backstory.
The audience
watching it doesn't have all that backstory. They just are like,
I know, but
this
he doesn't
is what I'm
give a
watching
shit.
Happening.
I'm just telling you in the moment.
That's what I took away from it.
I don't think so, because all he has to do is be like, this kid's a fuck up. Like, that doesn't mean that he's not a brilliant conductor. It just means the kid's a fuck up.
But he invited him to play with him.
But the audience, the judges don't know that.
Well, except they know that he's like really critical and like is extremely selective about everybody who plays in his orchestra, his band.
But somebody has a bad day. Like, I manage a bunch of employees and I do have one shitbag, but that's kind of a failing of him that I don't think that reflects on me. I mean, our team is very good. I can't, somebody fucks up and has a bad day. Somebody fucks up and has a bad day. The judges aren't.
I think there's a difference between fucking up and having a bad day, though, and not being able to play the piece of music that like is the first piece of music in your movement. Either way, I'm totally, again, willing to acknowledge this might be my issue with the movie and not like a real issue with the movie. It's just something that I personally got kind of, hung up on.
One thing I really like about the film that you kind of bring out, where you talk about how nobody's likable and people just keep doing and saying terrible things. And for me, I like it because, and Jack mentioned this, the realism of it. Because good people can be assholes, and good people can make mistakes, and good people can make bad decisions, and they can treat people badly.
Especially when they're going after something that they desire.
And they can hurt people they love who love them. And like, I consider myself a pretty good person. I try to be a good person, but have I done terrible things and things that I've regretted or feel bad for? Absolutely. Have I been an asshole to people? Sure. And a lot of it is like out of just ignorance or just, being stupid or just being unaware and not necessarily being malicious. But I think it's important that I like when films don't draw characters as like, you're good and you're bad. Right. I like it when they draw them as complex, multifaceted, like sometimes you're good and sometimes you're a real dick and you are really unlikable and you are really shitty. And that doesn't, because we aren't good and bad people. That's not how humans work. We are shades of everything, and we are, we're trying to do our best, most of us, but a lot of times we fuck up.
I love that scene in the jazz bar where they're talking, right? And like, I think, and there's two scenes. There's the one scene, even though he lied about how one of his students died, like the fact that it actually affected him. So you see that scene, and then you see the scene where they meet up again after the hearing or the trial or whatever happened, and they're in the jazz club, and he's watching Fletcher play, and it's this beautiful jazz song, and then They sit down and have a drink, as awkward as that's going to be, and then I think you really start to see, and Fletcher talks about, this is why I do what I do. And yeah, he knows he's pushing things. He even admits it. Like, he's like, yeah, who wouldn't think I'm just all peaches and sunshine? He knows that, it doesn't excuse it. But you start to really see, again, to Steph's point, this human side of him where he's just so goddamn passionate about the music. That doesn't excuse his behavior by any means, but he's so passionate about the music. Then you start to see this is him when he's not a tyrant. This is him when he is just in his element, happy, and then he fails and he sabotages, Andrew's. He tries to sabotage, and then he goes back to being a dick. But for a moment there, he's not. For a moment there, he is a human being with real emotion, real feeling, and he's really passionate about what is happening to jazz music. And I love, even though I don't love jazz music, I love his passion for it and his lament about like the death of jazz music.
We're teetering on a dangerous line when we say your passion for something justifies your horrifying actions.
Yeah.
And no, I know that's not what you're saying. I'm not trying to suggest that's what you're saying at all. I'm just saying, I think that maybe the movie's almost saying that. And it was a very weird push and pull when I watched this movie, because I spent the entire time thinking that, again, Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons are so fucking good in it. They're so amazing. They both give such good performances, such great, like, riveting, earth-shattering performances for such characters that I don't want to look at. And that's to an odd kind of push and pull, because I did not want to watch these characters. I did not feel like I wanted to spend time with these characters in any way at all. And while I understand the reality of sometimes characters are unlikable, I also feel like narratively, you have to have somebody you're rooting for. If you're telling a story, if you're creating a narrative, you have to have somebody you want to come out on top and you want to succeed. And I didn't have that with this. I didn't feel like at any point there was a character who I was hoping would get something out of this.
No, but it raises some very interesting questions because I don't know. I don't even know if you know what I got to think about this for a minute. So, Steph, why don't you go?
Well,
no, you know what? I'll go.
Okay.
I ask this every now and again. I'm back. I ask this every now and again because there's certain books and movies too, but there's books I've read and I've done this in reviews in the past, and it's not often. It's very uncommon. But there's occasional books that I will enjoy. It's a well-written book. The concept is sound. It's beautiful, narrative, whatever, all of the above. But nobody's likable. Like, they're all people that I probably wouldn't really want to hang out with or meet in real life. And I sometimes ask that question: can a piece of fiction be enjoyable? Can you get something out of it, whether it's emotionally resonant, whether it's entertaining, whether it's thought-provoking, whatever? Can you enjoy something when you really kind of don't like any of the people in it? And more often than not, for me, the answer to that is no. But there have been movies, this one, and there have been books too. And I can't think of any. I was trying to come up with, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there have been books where I'm like, realistically, I don't like any of these people, but it was still a damn good read. And so I think in a way, again, for people who do enjoy the movie, it's really kind of a resonant movie that's like to say, hey, like, you can make a compelling tale and not everybody has to be awesome in it. Not everybody has to be nice or good or even likable. Is it all just likable all the time? Yeah, okay, that gets that's a slog. It's a little struggle to get through, but like, none of them are particularly likable. That's okay. That happens in more movies than I think we kind of realize. And, but we enjoy the experience. And so I don't know. It's one of those deeper questions that I don't think we would have anywhere near enough time to get into. But I think that really is the hallmark of a good storyteller, whether it's a visual medium or whether it's in a book, that somebody can walk away from it having enjoyed it or taken something good from it, even if they didn't really necessarily enjoy any of the people in it.
I think that's a fair assessment, Jack. Truly, I think you've made a really good point, and I don't disagree with you, for the record. To kind of like dabble back to something I said previously. I think there's a very interesting version of this movie that's written by Aaron Sorkin that deals with the Social Network speech, where she says something along the lines of like, you're going to think that it's because women think you're a nerd, but in fact, it's because you're an asshole. And I think that's kind of what they were going for when she and he have that conversation, about like, where he tells her like, basically, you're aggressively mediocre and I don't give a fuck about you, which is really brutal. And again, maybe as a woman who's dealt with men who think that they're extraordinary when they're not, it's been a little bit triggering. But I felt like it could have been maybe written a little more pointedly, a little more satirically, and a little bit more to get to that point of like, to say like, hey, you're being a fucking piece of shit. It could have done something really incredible with this. And I am not that impressed with Damien Chazelle's work. I think he's kind of an okay writer. And I think that carries through. And maybe my feelings about this were a little bit tainted by the fact that I feel like I'm not entirely sure he knows what his perspective is. And that's fine. And I'm not, again...
Well, can
I can't say this enough. Yeah, of course. Please go ahead. I'm going to keep rambling. So
no, I want to just comment on the like. I don't even know if he knows what his perspective is. I think part of why I love this film is because I don't think that there is a black and white answer to this. I don't think there's a clear perspective, and I would think that he probably feels the same way. Like as an artist, he's like, on one hand, I kind of get being this passionate about something and willing to sacrifice everything and wanting so much for greatness and wanting to, kind of understanding the pursuit of greatness and how really like painful it can be and how alienating it can be. And on the other hand, be like, yeah, but these means are really fucked up and this is really abusive and this is really horrible. Mm-hmm. I think multiple things exist in this film that are true. And it's very layered and it's very complicated. And I don't think it's as easy as like, oh no, clearly this is bad and this is good and this is right and this is wrong. And this is the, what you're supposed to think. And this is what you're supposed to think is awful. I think it is nuanced. And I think that that's what makes it so effective. And so I think his perspective as a filmmaker is that perspective of like, I actually don't know who is really right in this scenario. I think there's shades of gray here. I think there's shades of right and shades of wrong. And it's complicated. And I don't know. I think that's an okay perspective to have. I don't think that makes you like, oh, you just don't know how you feel or you're just not, you don't have your shit together. I think that's human to be very conflicted by these kind of questions.
Yeah.
Oh, to be clear, I'm not trying to say anybody is like wrong for creating the art they want to create. Like, I am never saying that. I think people should make the art they want to create. I'm merely saying how it resonates with me. And to be fair, I can't completely divorce this from having watched La La Land, which I think gives me a whole different kind of perspective on the Damien Chazelle of it all. And that's not necessarily fair in trying to assess Whiplash. I am 100% ready to acknowledge that and to give you guys that credit. You're right. It's not necessarily fair to assess it in the shadow of movies he has made since then. However, I have seen those movies. I have seen those movies, and it's really hard to divorce that from your brain. So, well, all of this is just my way of saying I'm not a fan.
And that's
all
okay.
right. Well, that's a good segue. Do you guys think it's time for us to kind of go around and really just sort of sum up where we stand? I know we've talked about it a lot, but give our kind of closing arguments and say if it's no notes or how we feel about it. And I don't know, Jack, this is your baby. Do you want to start? Do you want to end? What do you want to do?
Sure. No, I'll go ahead.
Jack, you should start.
I will. I'll start. So again, I saw this when it came out or right after it came out. I didn't have any initial bias with his other works, and I'm not a big fan of La La Land or any of his other movies to be fair. So I can just as a music lover and as somebody who has pursued music initially, and then was like, I suck at this. I should just be a writer. Is it completely factual? I think for most people who've gone through any kind of like competitive music, it's probably felt like that. I don't think it is, except for maybe the 1%, anything like that. I mean, is it amped up to 11 for film? Absolutely. But I think as a creative in that regard, it can certainly feel like that you're being attacked in that way. And I don't know, again, I look at this movie and people who see J.K. Simmons and they only see him in the farmers commercials or whatever, they only see him in these other movies where he's kind of more mild mannered. I think the fact that you can take this character, from this actor who for most people is like, oh yeah, he's so nice, and make him utterly fucking terrifying in this movie. Like, people don't intimidate me. They just don't. And yet in person, he would intimidate me. I mean, I can readily admit that. And so again, I can look at that as on the merits of the music aspect and the performances. Yeah, I agree with Steph. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. I think this is what you take away from it. I think for people who have sacrificed everything in pursuit of their dream, whatever it happens to be, whether it's music or not, they can look at this movie and go, yeah, I get it. And I think for some of us, we can look at it and go, no fucking way, And that's, I think, the kind of the beauty of film, because a lot of times film isn't really black and white, isn't shades of gray. A lot of times film is very like, here's what you're supposed to feel, and here's who you're supposed to root for, and here, hey, we tied it all up in a nice little bow. And this movie doesn't do that, and I think that takes a lot of balls to not give you the right answer. It ultimately, you take away from it what you will as what you bring into it. And so, do I have some history with angry white yelling men? I do, but for me, in watching this, it's almost cathartic in a way, because it's fiction and it's happening to somebody else, and I can look at it and go, yeah, that's not me. I grew up with that, but I didn't manifest that in my own life. So thank God, because I'm not being like this to some poor kid who comes to work for me or something. So in that regard, I can go, yeah, this is good. This is how not to be. I don't know. I just, again, from the music aspect of it and the performances and the fact that it was shot in 19 days from this script that this guy was absolutely desperate to make, and he swung for the fences and he nailed it, and it was a critical darling. And some, like you said, you say these like career defining performances, if you will, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, J.K. Simmons is good in whatever he's in, obviously, but like in this movie, like he is, you believe that he's Fletcher. You don't think that he's J.K. Simmons anymore. He's this character. That's how invested he gets into this role, and that is impressive to watch. So, I don't come away from this movie feeling good necessarily, but I come away from this movie very affected. And for me, in that regard, like, and I can look back and go, authentically, is everything accurate? Yes. As far as the music is concerned and everything, it's all accurate. It's all perfect. The cinematography is great. The sound on the DVD is phenomenal. So, taking all these other aspects into this movie, for me, it is a no-notes movie, because everything just gels and coalesces into exactly what I wanted this movie to be. And so, no notes.
Kelly, do you want to go next, or do you want me to go?
No, you should go next. I'll finish it.
Okay. But then we'll end on a low note, not a high note.
Do you want me to go next?
No, I'm just teasing. Y'all go next. So for me, I think Whiplash, it's a brilliant jazz film. We just get that out of the way. I mean, musically, it is stunning. But I don't think that you have to love or care about jazz to appreciate it. I'm not really a jazz girl, and I was mesmerized by this. I think it's a gripping thriller that keeps you guessing at every turn, and it ensures you never know what to expect, and you can never relax, not even for a moment. It's a potent deconstruction of masculinity and the quest for both greatness and approval. The pacing is relentless, and the editing is frenetic, yet it's smooth like the music itself. Quieter, character-building moments are followed by moments of intense, jarring action, and the ending, at least for me, just leaves you absolutely breathless. This is a film that manages to fully invest audiences with just two main characters. Both Simmons and Teller are mesmerizing, delivering, as we said, career-defining performances. But I also, and I've talked about this before, I love that neither is black and white, and this isn't about good versus evil. Teller is a relatable and sympathetic protagonist in many ways, but he is just as willing to sacrifice everything and everyone in pursuit of his dream, and just as obsessed with greatness as Fletcher is. And the abusive Fletcher is allowed moments of empathy and vulnerability as well that humanize him and make us understand at least a little bit why he is the way he is. We don't have to agree with it, but we can kind of see the method to his madness. But I think that that's the point, that there is no black and white in life. And there are certainly no easy answers, as exemplified by the film's hanging question that serves as the real gem of Whiplash. Was Fletcher right? Do you need the crucible to purify the gold? Fletcher was a vicious man who insulted and abused Teller, but he was also the only one who truly understood the fire that burned inside him, saw value in his passion, and believed Teller could be something earth-shattering. Whiplash speaks about the uncompromising dedication and often painful sacrifices that must be made to achieve your dreams. The scenes in which Andrew is shown practicing till his face is drenched with sweat and blood trickles from his hands send shivers down your spine. And that's something you don't have to be a musician to appreciate. You just have to be someone who has ever hungered for something more, ached to be noticed, or yearned to be remembered. How far would you go? Most of us can't and won't go far enough, and that's why so few people make the kind of mark that stands the test of time. It's also why, for me, Whiplash is a goddamn masterpiece. No notes. Kelly?
My turn?
Yep.
I'm going to keep this pretty short and simple. I have notes. And I respect that people like this movie a lot. I didn't. I truly didn't. I don't like the idea that you have to suffer for your art. I think you can make really great art without suffering. And I think it's a ridiculous notion that we adhere to that. I think there's a lot that's good about this movie. I think J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller and Paul Weiser are really great about this movie. I will absolutely 100% never watch it again. And if you choose to, fucking great. Enjoy it. Savor it. Live in it. Wallow in every fucking second. It's for you. It ain't for me. I'm not a fan. And that's cool. It's just not my jam. I felt like it had a really mixed message about artistry, and I think there's a lot of complicated things that it has to say about, again, white people saving jazz, about using ableist and homophobic language in a way that is absolutely 100% not even remotely necessary to get a point across, that does no benefits to the storyline other than saying, like, look how edgy we are. But if you liked it, great. I'm super glad. I'm truly and genuinely super glad. It's just not my shit. And that's okay. My shit's sometimes weird, and sometimes people hate my shit. Enjoy what you enjoy. I did not enjoy this. I will not watch it again, but I'm super excited to hear what Steph has planned for next month's No Notes. And with that, I'm throwing it back to Steph. God.
Well,
I'm very excited about that, like, resigned notion.
I'm super scared now. This is the first time that we have vehemently disagreed on this level.
Mm-hmm.
It was just me. Why are you scared? I'm the only outsider. Everybody else disagreed with me.
Because I can't have you doing this to my No Notes pick next month. You have to be in love with my film or I will cry. All right, so next month, I'm going to return to the play, and I'm going to share one of my beloved cinematic treasures for discussion. And instead of picking a movie that I've cherished for years and years, I'm going to switch things up. And I'm going to go with a relatively recent release that set my heart ablaze. Although the movie's new, released in 2021, the love I have for the film's lead actor is eternal, which makes sense given his penchant for playing the undead.
I know.
I feel like we all know where you're going with this.
If you know me at all, even a little tiny bit, you know about my obsession with Nick Cage. He has made some truly objectively brilliant films, and he's made a ton of absolutely ridiculous but wildly fun films that have still brought me a great deal of joy. Last week, during our Afterglow show, Kelly asked me to share my favorite Nick Cage movie, and I told her that was pretty damn near impossible for me because I just love too many for different reasons. But it did inspire me to pick one of Cage's films that I do think is extraordinary and that I think more people need to see. In Pig, Cage plays a former celebrity chef turned truffle hunter living alone in the Oregon wilderness. After his beloved truffle pig is stolen, he must return to Portland to try to find the person responsible and rescue his beloved companion. Critics hailed it as a return to form for the once highly respected thespian, proving that he is so much more than a meme and a punchline. In talking about the film, Cage himself said, "I do feel that I've gone into my own wilderness and that I've left the small town that is Hollywood." It's an extraordinarily beautiful film, and I can't wait to celebrate my birthday by talking about one of my greatest loves. So that is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about Pig next month. Very, very nervous. I really hope you love it. I know neither one of you have seen it, so I'm excited, but I'm also
I'm excited too.
Anxious.
Bring it on.
Oh no, I'm excited. I've watched a lot of Nicolas Cage movies that are not good, and some that are extremely good. I'm a pro Nicolas Cage person. I've seen Bringing Out the Dead.
Entertaining.
Bringing Out the Dead. Moonstruck is one of my favorites. Such a good rom-com. I've seen what's the one with the dice? 8mm or not dice? The film 8mm with Joaquin Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix.
8mm is the snuff film one. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, thank you, Steph, for taking me out of my misery. Yes, that's the one. And I really liked that movie. I mostly have enjoyed a lot of what he's done. Anything he does with the Coen brothers is always good. I loved adaptations, so I'm ready for unexpected.
This is definitely different than anything that you've probably seen with him in it. Like it's a very different film for him, but it's really, I think it's quite remarkable. So I'm very excited to share it with you guys.
Very excited to watch it.
Sweet. Well, that is our show, folks. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoy this foray into film passion. If you liked what you heard, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on iTunes. That really helps more people discover us, and we would greatly appreciate it. And remember, in a mad, mad world, movies help remind us of our humanity and capacity for great beauty. Film criticism is important, but film celebration is essential. Until next time, take note of the movies that matter and join us in proudly proclaiming no notes. I would probably, well, I'm not going to now because we've had enough of it, but I would fight you on this a little bit.
And I would be very open to your fight.
Yeah.